What's up, guys? Brady Briggs here to do a fight recap of last night. I know I haven't been active with the channel in a while, so I would like to do some pre-fights and some recaps over the next several months and start slowly working my way into other videos that are probably going to be more interesting. But anyway, we had UFC Vegas 80 last night. We also had Bellator 300. Now, first off, I would just like to say about Bellator, they severely underperformed with this card. Now, I know they had three world title fights on their main card, but really, it could have been so much better. It's a pretty historic event. It's their 300th numbered event, and they didn't really stack the card the way I feel like they should have. I've heard rumors that Bellator is going under, and honestly, I hope they don't. Like, that sucks. They're a major promotion with really good fighters. Their world championships mean something. But no less, if they are indeed going under, they didn't do themselves any favors with last night's event. But we'll get into that after UFC, considering the Bellator main card came on after UFC ended. So, with the UFC Fight Night prelims, there wasn't really much that stood out except for the preliminary main event and the preliminary co-main event. Now, the co-main event showed Nate Maness, who came back for the first time in like a year. He started off his UFC career 3-0 inside the promotion. They claimed him to 14-1, and then he lost at Tagir Ulanbekov and Umar Nurmagomedov. He lost his last two fights. He came out and got a first-round knockout last night against a really highly touted kid that was a pretty sizable favorite against him. I was happy to see that. Nate Maness is a good fighter. He proved that once again last night. And then Karolina Kowalkiewicz defeated Dana Bellavita. Now, Carolina has had a pretty remarkable career resurgence as of late. So she went into her world title fight with Joanna Jędrzejczyk at 10-0. She lost that fight. She lost her next fight. She won two after that, climbed to 12-2, and then went on a 5-fight skid, falling to 12-7. We all thought she was done at this point. We all thought she was going to retire soon and that she shouldn't be fighting anymore. And turning 38 years old in less than a week, or actually exactly a week from today, she turns 38. You know, being in her late 30s, we had reason to think that. But no, she is now on a 4-fight winning streak. Honestly, that's the longest win streak she's had inside of her UFC career so far. Her longest previous was 3. So that was really cool to see. She's doing very well for herself after having quite a severe fall previously in her career. Bill Algeo and Alexander Hernandez. Man, Hernandez has got to be one of the bigger flukes in recent MMA history. He really does. Like, man, his first two performances inside the UFC and then what he's done recently, like, it couldn't be further. But like, he's such a different fighter than he used to be. Someone, I think it was maybe Luke Thomas or something, someone was saying in the pre-fight leading up to this that Alexander Hernandez going into the Donald Cerrone fight was talking all sorts of shit. He was unrealistically confident in himself, and he's fallen off quite a bit since then. He's not that brash kid anymore, and he doesn't quite believe in himself the way he used to. You can tell in the way he fights. Now, when he made his UFC debut, he KO'd current number 4 ranked Beneil Dariush in 42 seconds. He ran right fucking through him. That was really impressive. Beneil wasn't in the top 4 at that time, but it couldn't have been more impressive of a debut. It really couldn't. And then he handily grappled a very, very good grappler, a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt, a tri-star protege, Olivier Aubin-Mercier, who went on to win the PFL lightweight championship following that and hasn't lost since. He hasn't lost since leaving the UFC, rather. Those are about as two good of wins in your first 2 UFC fights as you can have. And then he lost to Donald Cerrone. He beat Francisco Trinaldo in a very controversial decision. Then he lost to Drew Dober. Then he beat Chris Grotzmacher. Then he lost to Thiago Moises. Then he knocked out Mark Breeden. Then he lost to Renato Moicano and Billy Quarantillo. And the Quarantillo fight was his featherweight debut. He actually looked really great in that fight until he didn't. He was handily out wrestling Billy Q, which is a pretty big feather in his cap, to be honest. But he faded and he got stopped late in the second. And then he beat Jim Miller after he went back up to 155. Then he went back down to 145 and lost to Bill Algeo last night. He didn't look bad, but Algeo looked better. He was able to pick him apart pretty easily. He got caught a few times, but he stayed tough like he usually is. Bill Algeo is durable as hell. And yeah, he has gone from 10-1 to 14-7, and most of his losses come in the second round. That's generally when he fades. Now he got poked in the eye a couple minutes into round two in this fight, and it gave him a couple minutes of a breather. And I was like, that's actually really good for him because he usually falls off in the second. Maybe now he'll have confidence in his cardio, but he fell to him. On that note, I think Bill Algeo, he fights a lot like a mix between Stephen Thompson and TJ Dillashaw. His striking, it's very fun to watch. He's not an elite fighter, but he's now 4-1 in his last five. That only loss is to Andre Fili by split decision, and a fight many saw him winning. So Bill Algeo's been doing really well for himself lately. Hernandez, man, he might get his pink slip after this. He's now 0-2 at 145 pounds. He can't beat anyone of status at 155 anymore. Man, it's unfortunate for him at 31. Yeah, he's 31 years of age. He just turned 31. Again, exactly 1 week ago on October 1st. Yeah, I expected so much more of his career, and it doesn't look like it's really going to be much at this point. It hasn't for a while. Drew Dober absolutely ran right through Rick Glenn in the next fight, which I saw coming. Honestly, I didn't even know if it would make it midway through the first round like it did. Dober got back in the win column. He's now 7-3 in his last 10, all 7 wins by knockout. And the guys that beat him are Islam Makhachev, Brad Riddell, when Riddell was still doing very well for himself. And then Matt Frivola, who is doing very well for himself. He's on a 3 or 4 fight knockout streak right now. So next up was Joaquin Buckley and Alex Morono in the feature fight of the night. Something needs to be said about Alex Morono's durability. Like, I've seen him get knocked out before. He got knocked out by Santiago Ponzinibbio. He got knocked out by Chaos Williams. He got knocked out by Nico Price. And I thought going into this fight, like, I know how good of a fighter Morono is. He's actually, like, you take one look at him and you wouldn't think he's that skilled. He's actually a very skilled fighter on the feet and on the ground. But I was saying to myself going in, if those 3 guys can stop him with strikes, Joaquin Buckley can do it. And he couldn't. Buckley did well in round 1. He had a little bit harder of a time finding his range in the second, and then in the third, he seemingly couldn't miss. He hurt Morono so many times. Morono was absolutely exhausted, and he kept taking Joaquin Buckley's best shots. Buckley fights a lot like a lesser version of Mike Tyson. He just goes in there and throws down every single time he fights, always throwing heavy combinations. Morono was able to get out of the way of a lot of them through the first 10 minutes. And then he started to fade because Buckley's pressure didn't slow down at all. And Buckley got a pretty dominant 30-27, 30-27, 30-26 win. Now, I thought 30-26 was the correct scorecard. That third round was definitely a 10-8. He beat the fuck out of Morono in that third round. But yeah, it was a good performance by Buckley. Just as I said, Hernandez is now 0-2 since dropping to 145. Buckley is now 2-0 since dropping down to 170. I'm excited to see what he does next. He wants a main event next. I don't think he's going to get it, but I'm excited to see his next fight. Joe Pyfer and Abdul Razak Al Hassan. Now, there were 2 things I thought going into this fight. One of these guys is getting knocked out, or it's going to be a boring, timid decision because they both have so much power. And I thought that maybe, they had a lot of respect for each other's power, and they did. Pyfer said he was nervous going into this fight, and who wouldn't beat Al Hassan? Though is 12-5 and is like 1-2-4 in his last 6, I think. he can crack. That dude hits so hard. All 12 of his wins are knockouts, 11 of them in the first round. The only one that made it out of the first round made it 28 seconds into the second. Normally, he KOs dudes stiff when he wins. And Hassan, he got taken down a couple times in the first round, even though he was able to get right back up. So he showed improvement in that regard. He got right up when he got taken down like 5 seconds into the fight. And then he used the guillotine to escape the second takedown. He used it to stand back up to his feet. But back when he was back on his feet, though, he was so timid. He was so gun shy. He didn't throw anything. He defended some of Pfeiffer's punches. Some of them got through, and didn't throw much of anything. And then in the second round, he started to use his leg kicks, and it was really working for him. You could tell Pfeiffer's leg was definitely being affected by those heavy calf kicks. He switched stances. He was walking a little gingerly on him, but he was able to get Al Hassan down and get the arm triangle choke submission. Now, I will say, when he got that first takedown, like 5, 10 seconds into the first round, he locked the standing arm triangle up then as well. And he tried to trip Al Hassan down to the ground. And it didn't work for him because, well, Al Hassan's done judo his whole entire life. But once he got him a little tired, once he started out striking him, it came easier. He got the submission win. He's now 3-0 in the UFC with 3 finishes. Joe Pyfer has a pretty bright future, I think. He's pretty good. And then the main event between Bobby Green and Grant Dawson, man, this one hurt. This one really hurt. I love Grant Dawson. I always have. Ever since he fought Julian Erosa in his UFC debut, I knew that he had the potential to really become something special because he's got a Colby Covington like pace. He fights a lot like a mix between Colby and Bryce Mitchell, with the sense that he's very wrestling heavy, yes, but he just doesn't get tired, man. He doesn't get tired, and he gets everyone down. And he's probably the best back taker in the sport. Like, he's up there with Charles Oliveira when it comes to taking the back. Um, let's see. Has 20 wins, 13 are submissions, like 11 or 12 are rear naked chokes. Okay, like, he is an elite grappler. Going into this fight, I thought he shouldn't have taken the fight. He's ranked number 10. Bobby Green is unranked, and the result, I still feel that way. He shouldn't have taken that fight. Good for Bobby Green. Bobby Green is seriously good. Even though he's 37 years old, dude, he's better than he's ever been. Like, let's see what Bobby Green has done as of late. So, since 2021, he lost a very close fight to Rafael Fiziev, a fight many thought he could have gotten the nod in. He knocked out Al Iaquinta in the first round, the only guy to ever stop Al Iaquinta with strikes. He beat Nasrat Haqparast, then he lost to Islam Makhachev and Drew Dober. He was beating Drew Dober handily. He was piecing him up, but ended up getting caught by one of the hardest hitters, if not the hardest hitter at lightweight. Drew Dober just surpassed the knockout record last night. He now has 9 at 155 pounds. Jared Gordon, he had no contest with earlier this year. Then he submitted Tony Ferguson in July and just knocked out Grant Dawson last night. Now, Bobby Green's first UFC win came against Jacob Volkman, another wrestler like Tony. Even though Tony don't usually, he started out wrestling. And he got a third round submission against him late in the final minute of the fight, just like he did against Ferguson. There's an interesting parallel there. And then he is now coming off a knockout win over Grant Dawson. Another parallel. Grant Dawson, his only loss prior, he was 20-1-1 going into this fight. His only loss prior came by knockout 35 seconds into the first round. This one came 33 seconds into the first round. And yeah, man, this one really hurt. As an MMA fan, like, I'm always happy to see underdogs win. I'm always happy to see how these fights play out. But man, I really wanted Grant Dawson to win this one. And I knew he had the potential to, but he started out throwing a couple wild overhands to try and find his range and get in range for a takedown. Bobby didn't let him hit him, and he ended up landing a perfect left cross that dropped Grant on the spot and followed up with some ground and pound for the finish, becoming the first person to beat Grant in his first 10 UFC fights. For me, as a huge Grant Dawson fan, I've been high on him for so long. It was sad to see because, man, this kid was 8-0-1 in the UFC. And he's still 8-1-1 in the UFC. He's still an elite guy. But he was finally in a main event. Something he was saying going into this fight is because he got tired one time, people seem to think that he doesn't have good cardio. And that really resonated with me because I've watched all of his fights, and it was the one fight against Rick Glenn, his second fight at 155 pounds. He got tired, and other than that, he breaks guys. He absolutely breaks them, and usually ends up finishing them. He's only got 3 decision wins in his whole career. I was so happy to see him in a main event spot. I was so happy to see him go into those fourth and fifth rounds because I didn't think he was gonna. People were comparing him to Islam with his grappling. I didn't think he was going to get Bobby out of there in the first round. I thought it was going to be. I thought Bobby was going to be durable, and he was going to probably win a decision against him, or in a perfect world, get a fourth, fifth round finish against him. Bobby shut that down in the first minute of the fight, and yeah, I guess I'll have to wait a little while longer to see Dawson fight 5 rounds, which is really upsetting to me. But good for Bobby Green, though. I've always been a Bobby Green fan too, ever since he came to the UFC from Strikeforce. Um, he's had a really interesting career, to say the least. But yeah, he showed up last night, and he better have a number next to his name come Monday or Tuesday, whenever they do the rankings. Okay, let's get into Bellator 300. So I'm just going to go over the main card. Liz Carmouche versus Alimale McFarlane. Alimale McFarlane, 4-time former defending champion, uh, challenging Liz Carmouche for her title. Now, she couldn't win the belt because she missed weight by like 1.5 pounds. She missed the flyweight limit. So she was ineligible to win the belt, but that don't mean she was ineligible to win the fight. This fight was actually really boring, I will say. This is part of the reason Bellator should have done better. Like, I know you got 3 world title fights, man. Add another one or something. Y'all should have saved Johnny Eblin versus Fabian Edwards for this card. You should have saved Aaron Pico for this card. Like, it just it underperformed. It underperformed. But when Valentina Shevchenko lost to, or my bad, when Liz Carmouche lost to Valentina Shevchenko, who she beat previously, mind you, that was her last UFC fight. It was for the UFC flyweight title. She lost the fight. She fell to 13-7 as a professional, and she was 4-4 in her last 8. Since then, she has gone 7-0 inside the Bellator cage. She's won all 7 fights she's had since, with 6 finishes, 4 of which were world title fights, as she won the belt from Juliana Velasquez and then defended it 3 times, last night being her third. She's now 20-7 as a pro, and I think she's 39 years old. She is. She'll be turning 40 in February. Man, what a career resurgence Liz Carmouche has had. Like, it's just incredible. 7-0 with 6 finishes. Who pictured that happening after she left the UFC? Now, I know she isn't fighting the very best in the world, but Alimale McFarlane, good fighter. Even though I thought she lost her last fight to Kana Watanabe, I think everyone thought that. She's still a good fighter. Juliana Velasquez, good fighter. Kana Watanabe, good fighter. She finished all of them. She finished all of them. Like, she has done so well for herself lately, and honestly, it makes me really happy to see because I never expected she would leave the UFC and win her next 7 fights in a row, no less with 6 finishes. Now, the first round, these two are very good friends, longtime teammates, so they fought a lot like it. Um, the first round was very timid. I think Alimale landed a couple punches on Carmouche, and Carmouche landed absolutely nothing. So the first round probably went to Alimale. The second round was very similar. Alimale hit her a couple times, and Carmouche started to get her leg kicks going. In round 3, Alimale was, I don't know, she shot in on a takedown or if she was just stepping into range. I don't quite remember, but she got hit with a leg kick as she did it, and it dropped her. It hurt her leg. She was injured from there on. And from there on, Carmouche just kept attacking the leg and attacking the leg. In the fourth round, she dropped her many times with leg kicks. And honestly, I thought the fight could have been stopped a little sooner. Yeah, without her leg having gotten injured as badly as it did. But 17 seconds into the fifth and final round, Carmouche stops her with a leg kick, badly injures her leg. She probably tore all sorts of shit in it. Um, yeah, that was bad. I think going into this fight, neither of them wanted each other to get hurt, and that's probably why the first round went a lot like it, or the first and second rounds went a lot like they did. They didn't want to take something from the other, and they definitely didn't want to hurt each other. They're good friends, but they're professionals. As last night, as the fight went on, it showed. And honestly, more damage happened to one of them than either of them could have possibly wanted. Um, yeah, we're not going to see Lee Malay for a while, and Carmouche got another really, really good win. All right, let's go to Chris Cyborg and Kat Zingano. This was their featherweight title fight last night. Chris Cyborg absolutely ran right through Kat. Kat had another, like Liz Carmouche, had quite a remarkable career resurgence. Going into her title fight with Ronda Rousey in 2015, she was 9-0. She lost that fight, and she lost her next two. Then she beat Marianne Hanaud, and then lost to Megan Anderson, which was kind of a freak accident type of fight. Nonetheless, she lost. After that, since 2020, the same year Liz Carmouche went to Bellator, after that, she went 4-0. She won her next four fights going into this long-awaited showdown with Chris Cyborg. Now, Cyborg ran right through her. Like I said, she's now 27-2 as a pro with 21 knockouts. I think that was her fifth title defense, which is the most of any current Bellator champion. Yeah, it was her fifth title defense, which is just remarkable. She is a Strikeforce featherweight champion. She's an Invicta featherweight champion. She's a UFC featherweight champion, and she's a Bellator featherweight champion. She defended all of them multiple times. She only ever lost to Amanda Nunes in her prime. She's 26-2 in her last 28, or 26-1 rather, in her last 27 fights. It's absolutely remarkable. I wish we could have saw the Amanda rematch, but never got to. As for Kat Zingano, she's probably the best female fighter ever to had never won a belt. So it's still an impressive win because she beat Raquel Pennington, who's a top three talent right now. She beat Misha Tate. She beat Amanda Nunes. Like Kat Zingano's had a very, very good career. She's like the Donald Cerrone of women's MMA, or Alexander Gustafsson of women's MMA. Probably the best to never win a belt. As for Cyborg, yeah, at 38 years of age, there is no sign of slowing down, which is weird because I thought she was slowing down over her last couple fights, over her last few fights, but maybe Kat being 41 had part to do with it, but Cyborg looked great. And then the main event, which also wasn't the best fight, but Usman Nurmagomedov got the clean sweep on the cards against Brent Primus. This was starting to look a lot like Carmouche and Ali Malay was looking. With the leg kicks, Usman was tearing that lead leg of Primus up handily. And he continued attacking his lead leg throughout the fight, but he started to diversify his attack more, open up with his hands, open up with his side kicks to the body, wrong kicks to the body, wrong kicks to the head, snap kicks up the middle. They worked really well for him last night. And he easily out-wrestled Primus whenever he felt like it. So Primus, former Bellator lightweight champion, Usman Nurmagomedov, now has 3 wins over world champions, his last 3. And yeah, he's looking as unstoppable as ever. Now, with as much as he kicks, he's such a diverse striker. It's remarkable to see, and his wrestling is also at a very high level. This was only his 4th decision win and 18-0 as a pro. So I'm still very excited to see what Usman Nurmagomedov can do in the future. Let's see what the Bellator lightweight rankings are. What? Their site is gone. Okay, Wikipedia's working. All right, Patricky Pitbull is the #1 contender. Alexander Shabliy, it's got to be him. Alexander Shabliy, who's 23-3 as a pro. He just stopped Brent Primus last year. He beat Tafik Musayev in his last fight. Also stopped him, a former Bellator or Ryzen lightweight champion rather, who was 20-4 going into their fight. Yeah. He also beat Adriano Martins in the past, who's a good fighter. Yeah, I think Alexander Shabliy deserves the fight, the #2 ranked lightweight. So, yeah, 18-0 versus 23-3. Let's see it. And eventually, I really want to see Usman Nurmagomedov come to the UFC. Bellator lightweight champions have a history of going to the UFC. We got Eddie Alvarez, we got Michael Chandler, we got Will Brooks. They have a history of going over to the UFC. So I'm very excited to see that. And on that note, I want to see Johnny Eblen in the UFC because everyone that trains with him or has trained with him, everyone thinks he's the best middleweight in the world. They all bet the house on it, no less. And then Yaroslav Amazov. You got 3 of the top undefeated fighters in the entire sport. Usman Nurmagomedov, 18-0. Johnny Eblen, I think he's 14-0 now. And Yaroslav Amazov, 27-0. Like, they have really elite talents. I can't wait to see their futures, and I really hope some of them come to the UFC. So, yeah, I hope you guys like the video. Like and subscribe if you do. I'll be back with more content soon.